I don't want you to just listen to me as the expert and say, okay, I don't meet the criteria of the offer and compromise. I'll go with something else. I want you to actually understand why. Okay. In addition to that, I always tell you all, I will never judge your tax competency. This time is going to be a little bit different. You may see on YouTube, there are some people who have prepared their own offer and compromise. It was accepted. Those are exceptions. Those are not the rules. Okay. I would not recommend that anybody who is in serious tax debt prepare their own offer and compromise.
Welcome to the Tax Relief with Timalyn Bowens podcast. Are you behind on taxes? Is the IRS threatening you or your business? Are you overwhelmed and confused about how to resolve your tax issues? Let's join Timalyn as she explains your options and how she may be able to help. Timalyn Bowens is America's favorite EA.
Hey, family. Welcome to episode 48 of the Tax Relief with Timalyn Bowens podcast. There is a topic that I've been getting inquiries to cover because taxpayers and tax professionals alike have reached out and said, how in the world do you have a tax relief podcast and you have yet to talk about the offer and compromise? Listen, I've mentioned it, but I haven't gone over it in detail because one, if you have been listening to me, you know that a lot of taxpayers don't actually qualify for it. However, that's what is pushed on the radio stations and TV ads. Number two, because so few people actually qualify for it, it's very difficult to be able to break that down within a 15-minute segment. So here's my disclaimer right now. No, this is not going to be a 45-minute episode. However, I may need a few episodes to break this down. Okay. Right now, I'm predicting it's going to be 2 episodes. So we'll have 48 and 49. This episode, we're going to talk about what is an offer and compromise. And then in the next episode, we'll talk about how do you qualify for an offer and compromise. Okay. Because there's something that a lot of people actually don't know. Yes, we do have the offer and compromise, but did you realize there are actually 3 different types of offer and compromise? You didn't? Well, I'm glad you tuned in today because I'm going to break them down. The first one that we're going to look at today is the offer and compromise doubt as to collectability. Okay. The second one is an offer and compromise debt as to liability. And then the final type of offer and compromise, and the final thing that we'll take a look at today is an offer and compromise effective tax administration. All right. So this is for exceptional circumstances. So as I mentioned before, not every taxpayer is going to qualify for an offer and compromise. As a matter of fact, over 90% of taxpayers actually qualify for an installment agreement, which we talked about almost 40 episodes ago. So if you're listening to this and you're like, yeah, I don't really think that I'm a good fit for this, I strongly recommend that you go back and listen to episode 10, where I cover installment agreements, because realistically, that may be what your financial situation is calling for. However, let me go ahead and explain these because even though they are not the option that a lot of people qualify for, you may very well be the person that does qualify for an offer and compromise. I also want to share something else. So, you all know that I'm on my personal mission to fill the tax literacy gap one taxpayer at a time. The other part, or the other reason as to why I want to go over the offer and compromise and take my time and do 2 different episodes is because I don't want you to just listen to me as the expert and say, okay, I don't meet the criteria of the offer and compromise. I'll go with something else. I want you to actually understand why. Okay. In addition to that, I always tell you all, I will never judge your tax competency. This time is going to be a little bit different. You may see on YouTube, there are some people who have prepared their own offer in compromise. It was accepted. Those are exceptions. Those are not the rules. Okay. I would not recommend that anybody who is in serious tax debt prepare their own offer in compromise. Okay. Even if I was in a situation where I was buried in debt and had no way to pay it, and I thought I needed an offer in compromise, I would hire somebody else to prepare this for me. Because remember, when you hire someone for tax representation, that is the equivalent of legal representation because they literally are standing in your place to present your financial situation to the IRS as to why you shouldn't pay this debt. That's the same as being your own attorney in a criminal case. It's not something that I would recommend. All right. So now that I've given the disclaimers, let's get right into it. When we're looking at the offer and compromise, doubt as to collectability, this is going to be an agreement between you and the IRS that's going to settle your debt for less than the amount owed. Now, that is what is pushed on the radio, internet, and TV, right? Settle your debt for pennies on the dollar. But again, if you've been listening to me, you know that sometimes a partial pay installment agreement also does the same thing, but it's going to protect your assets and not have them on the line. And the IRS won't be looking to liquidate those assets so that you can pay the debt. Okay. That's a huge difference there. So, right there, let's bust that myth. The offering compromise isn't the only thing that can help you pay pennies on the dollar. Okay. With the doubt as to collectability, the IRS will not accept your offer if they believe the liability can be paid in full in a lump sum or in an installment agreement. Again, an installment agreement is simply a payment arrangement that is made between you and the IRS that gives you, typically, if they have their way, you paying the debt off within 72 months, right? That's going to be a streamlined agreement. We'll pay a streamlined agreement. Or if you owe $10,000 or less, you've been compliant the past 3 years, you were now making the strides to have withholding, estimated tax payments so you don't owe again in the future, you may qualify for a guaranteed payment plan, right? If you qualify for those things where you can pay it off within 36 months, 72 months, the IRS is going to look at your offer, laugh, and return it back to you rejected. Okay. Now, you may be thinking, but I can't pay it off within 72 months. Well, they'll give you some leniency there as well, because remember, they are looking at the CSID. So they legally have 10 years from the time that tax was assessed to collect from you. That's what we call the collection statute expiration date. If the IRS believes that you would be able to pay this debt off in installments before that date, they also will not entertain your offer. Okay. Then the IRS is going to look at your income as well as your assets to determine what the reasonable collection potential is. And that's why I mentioned assets earlier, because there's a certain percentage of your assets that they want the offer to be worth. All right. So, for example, let's say that you have a 2019 vehicle and it's paid off. All right. At the time of this recording, it's 2024. So the way that used vehicles are working right now, you probably would have a lot of equity in that, right? Especially if you don't owe anything. They would want your offer to be at least 80% of that vehicle. So those are things that we have to take into consideration when we're preparing the offer. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about it now because, again, next episode, I'm going to talk about how to qualify for an offer in compromise. This is just an overall, what is the offer? What are they kind of looking for? Okay. So And again, I will remind you, this is going to be something that is a privilege, not necessarily a right. Okay, because they can't put you into a financial hardship collecting these back taxes. However, they don't have to cut you a deal if they see that they have the potential to collect the full debt before the CSIT. When we're looking at an offer and compromise settlement that involves $100,000 or more, that is going to actually have to even go up to a higher level and require the approval of the IRS District Council. Okay? Now, the offer and compromise used to be known as the Fresh Start Initiative, Fresh Start Program. So if you hear that, you're like, hey, the IRS has this new program that you may qualify to pay your debt for pennies on the dollar. They're referring to the offer and compromise. And the offer and compromise Fresh Initiative Program is no longer new. That started in 2011. However, there were significant changes made in 2011 that will help you with your taxes today. They made changes that revised the computation for the taxpayer's future income. All right, so it's a little bit lenient there. It also extended the amount that it allows the client to repay for student loans because that was not factored in as an allowable expense. So if you listen to the episode about the 433, that collection information statement, you know that there's a certain allotment that they give you for certain expenses. Okay. So under the Fresh Initiative, this gives you more wiggle room for student loans. The same is true for state and local delinquent taxes. All right. So if you have a payment arrangement for your state and local taxes that are delinquent, that's now an allowable expense. So with this, that did give us room where more offers and compromises are accepted. However, it's not something that everybody is going to qualify for. All right. So that is the offer and compromise doubt as to collectability. Next, we have the offer and compromise doubt as to liability. This is going to be submitted by the taxpayer, which is you, unless, of course, you're a tax professional listening. But this is going to be submitted when there is a genuine dispute as to the existence or the amount of the correct tax debt under the law. So, for you all that don't believe that you have to pay taxes, this is not for you. This is when there has legitimately been an error on part of the IRS in assessing the tax debt. And that is where we have doubt as to liability. So the offer has to be something greater than zero. Okay. And the offer has to be based on the amount that you believe is the correct amount of tax, not what the IRS is saying that they currently owe. Now, when we have the data as to collectability, there's booklet 656 that must be filled out in the 433A parentheses OIC. In this situation with data as to liability, you were not going to be required to turn in that collection information statement or the form 433A OIC, which those are the same thing, okay? So don't get confused when I say or. With this offer, instead of filling out the 656, you're going to fill out form 656L. All right. So it's a little bit different just for this doubt as to liability. Typically, the folks that are going to be filing this are going to be the ones where there was an audit and tax was assessed, and you, as a taxpayer, had incomplete documentation, and now you have the supporting documentation to show that you really don't owe the debt that was assessed. Okay. Now, I know I'm at my time to log off. However, let me get this offer and compromise effective tax administration, and I'm going to let you go. All right. Now, if this has been useful in helping you to understand, like, hey, there is more than one option when it comes to an offer and compromise, or, I don't really think an offer and compromise is the best fit for me, please let me know in the podcast reviews if you found this helpful. And when you leave me a review on the different podcast platforms, that helps other listeners to find the podcast and makes them want to check it out themselves. So by doing that, not only are you doing them a favor, but you're doing me a favor by helping me to fill the tax literacy gap one taxpayer at a time. So with the offer and compromise effective tax administration, this is when the taxpayer owes the amount, all right? So you know you owe the tax. We're not arguing that. So that's why the data as to liability isn't a good fit. However, they also are going to have the assets that would be able to be liquidated to cover the debt, but due to exceptional circumstances, requiring full payment would cause an undue economic hardship, or it would be unfair, unequitable. Where I've seen this used the most is when we have senior citizens that owe the IRS, but them paying the debt is unrealistic. Let me give you an example. Let's say we have a retired senior citizen that is currently living on Social Security income. They own a home, so yes, that's an asset that they could liquidate to pay the tax debt. However, I don't know if you've checked the economy out and inflation. If they were to sell their home to pay the tax debt and then live another 10 years, it would be nearly impossible and they would be facing an economic hardship due to paying those taxes back because the cost of living is crazy. And even with adjustments to Social Security, it's not enough to live off of, right? You can't pay rent with somebody's Social Security check in 2024, okay? Maybe 30 years ago, but not 2024. So by liquidating their asset, that would put them out of a home and they would not be able to keep a roof over their head. They would not be able to afford being in assisted living or anything like that. So the IRS would be putting them in an undue economic hardship. That taxpayer may be a wonderful candidate for an offer and compromise effective tax administration. Okay. Also, if you are a taxpayer who maybe you have assets, but you were hurt on the job and you don't have a full pension anymore because you've been paying medical expenses and you are limited to SSI, this may be a good option for you to explore. Now, with that being said, I know that we've covered a lot. In the next episode, I'm going to cover how to qualify for an offer and compromise. While you're wrapping your head around this, if you don't want to wait another 2 weeks, check this out. Now, you all know I say it doesn't have to be me, but get the help you need. If you are in a dire situation and you're like, hey, Timalyn, I really need to know if the offer and compromise is the best way for me to go, if an installment agreement is the best way for me to go, you need to go to my website, www.bowenstaxsolutions.com, and it's solutions because we have more than one for you, right? And book a discovery call with me. All right. Now, if you want to know exactly what to do and you go do it, that call is not going to be free, right? Because you have this information, you have my YouTube page, my blog that walks you through different things. But if you want something customized to fit you, for me to help you go through that 433 to see what you actually qualify for, then go to the website and book the call today. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to listen today. I'd like to thank Jim Ray Consulting Services for helping me get this message out to you. I hope you found the information helpful. Did you know 1 in 50 people have a tax problem? Please share this episode with your friends and family because you never know who may need help. Again, thanks for listening. Hey, just as a reminder, this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. It provides a framework and possible solutions for solving your tax problems, but it is not legally binding. Please consult your tax professional regarding your specific tax situation.